Let's get on that. Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Alan, for spending time with us today. I know you're zooming in and calling in from Queensland, Australia. So thank you. And we're in Seattle, Washington. We're really excited to chat with you. Again, this is recorded, so it will go onto YouTube, and we're going to make sure that folks are able to access this information because you have some amazing work you've done. For over the past couple of decades, I believe. And I know meeting you last time, Alan, was really amazing too through Patry and learning about the other work that you've done. So Alan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what do you do, what's your organization, and how often you've been to Cambodia?
So, yep, I'm Alan, and just to sort of let you know, I'm actually from Melbourne. The Brisbane, Queensland was something that was in the newspaper article by the Phnom Penh Post, where they researched about the company that I work for. So I work for Genie Solutions, and I train medical specialists, so doctors and receptionists, on how to use practice management software. So I've been doing that for 2 years
Mm.
now. But prior to that, I was also working in a very similar field, training dentists on how to use practice management software. So totally out of the scope of what I do for Cambodia. So all these little mini projects I've been sort of doing, as you said,
Yeah.
over the last decades. Um, like I've been to Cambodia since, well, the first time I've been to Cambodia was since 2001. At that point, I was only 17. And growing up, parents were always saying, "Oh, let's go to Cambodia, go visit your grandparents, your aunties, uncles, and cousins, and whatnot." Primarily because my parents pretty much came here on their own after the Khmer Rouge,
Mm-hmm.
so all my aunties and uncles are back home, so to speak. And back then, being young and immature, I never had that interest to actually go to Cambodia. I saw it as a hot, humid, I'll say it, dirty,
Oh, it's hot.
mosquito-ridden, yep, mosquito-ridden place, and I just didn't want to go, right? As I said, I was 17. But at the start of 2001, when I was in year 12, parents were like, "Oh, after you've graduated from year
Mm-hmm.
12, we're gonna go overseas and have our first family holiday and visit your relatives." So come to the middle of 2001, after hearing sort of like that news, I started sort of researching about Cambodia. So all I knew about Cambodia was Angkor, the Khmer Rouge, mosquitoes, hot, humid. That's all I knew. And when I say Angkor, it's literally just Angkor Wat, but
Uh-huh.
nothing else. Just the fact that it looks
Mm.
like that. That's all. But after sort of researching, I sort of became interested in the history. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I sort of became a bit more familiar with the history, the culture, and I
And Alan,
started.
I was going to ask also, Alan, what about the language piece? Did you already have that already before you got to Cambodia, or is that something you picked up as well on your journey with your family?
Well, growing up in Australia, obviously English being the first language, but at home we speak Khmer. But in primary school, Dad used to teach me Khmer as well,
Oh,
and
good.
I was also sent to Saturday and Sunday school, so I was studying Khmer on the weekends. But I didn't actually finish my year 12, sorry, my Khmer studies,
Mm-hmm.
primarily because when I was in year 8 English school, I was actually doing year 10 Khmer language school.
Mm.
So they were saying, "Oh, you're too young to be doing your what we call VCE, like your final exams for the end of high school. You're too young
Mm.
to be actually doing that. So we recommend that you repeat year 10 or skip a year and come back." I
What
was
did you
like, "I'm not
choose?
repeating. I'm not repeating. I'm skipping a year," but I
I
never went
can't
back.
believe they asked you that though. Like, why even give you the option of repeating it if you can just skip a grade?
Yeah, but then once you skip a grade, you don't go back, right? So I had already skipped 2 years to be doing year 10 Khmer, but yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
were saying I was too young to actually belong.
Mm.
So that's where I skipped, but then never went back to actually do my finals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Um, but yeah, in terms of going to Cambodia for the first time, like I said, sort of did the research and became interested in anything and everything Cambodian.
Mm-hmm.
I started sort of eBaying items. I just started accumulating a massive collection of books and documentaries, and started sort of collecting banknotes back then as well. And that
Yeah.
is sort of how I found and sort of got connected with Wang Patri.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
What year
comparing
was
our
that?
that would have been pro 2001.
Okay.
Yeah, 2001. Because I found him through my connection, the
Mm-hmm.
website back then was literally
Oh,
an
oh,
online
that's way
forum.
back. Yeah.
It was literally just an online forum. But we connected and we were like comparing our collections, and
Uh-huh.
I must say I think I had a bigger collection than his.
Yeah, you say that.
um, but yeah, so after sort of researching and becoming interested in Cambodia,
Mm-hmm.
I landed in Cambodia, and it it just felt right. It felt like
Mm.
home.
Mm.
And I was there for a month,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to come back home, as in back home to Australia.
Right, right. Yeah.
So that was my first trip. So just to answer your question in terms of how many times I've been,
Yeah.
since 2001, I've been back 15 times. So I
Wow.
returned the
Okay.
following year in 2002 on my own
Mm-hmm.
at the age of 18. And being the second trip to Cambodia, I was on my own, but being the oldies, my auntie sort of followed me wherever I went
Mm-hmm.
at that
Mm-hmm.
point in time. It wasn't until later trips where I became a bit more independent, in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
the aunties and uncles were a bit more flexible, I guess, with, oh, that's okay, you can go on your own now. But yeah, they have that
Yeah.
whole oldies mentality where it's dangerous, don't go anywhere, don't go
Mm.
too far, etc.
That was the
Um,
early 2000s, right? Yeah, I remember that when it was like just make sure you're just safe and things weren't as they are now, but the country has progressed. Alan,
right.
when you were there and you've seen all these changes, I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, you've been there 15 times, so you've seen it before. It had all this development, it had all this infrastructure that's going on right now. What was your experience around that?
I found, like, especially with the traffic. So the
Yeah,
first few trips, I was like asking my cousins, why are people always swearing at each other? Because back here in Australia, if you're honking, you're telling someone to F off, or bugger off or whatever.
yeah.
But Cambodia, a honk literally means I'm coming, I'm here, sort of thing. And I
Mm-hmm.
questioned that, but there was no traffic laws, so to speak, in the early years. And then over the years, I have seen that people are now sort of abiding by traffic lights, road rules. People are giving way a bit
Abiding.
more. Yep, yeah. And maybe not to the extent of the Western world, but it
Mm.
has developed and come a long way where people are sort of respecting the traffic laws. Like, another good example would be the ambulance. Like, people
Mm.
actually make way for ambulance to go through, whereas the early years, nah, no chance.
I don't think I've ever seen an ambulance there. I've
I've seen
never.
it a few times. Yep, I've seen it a few
Really?
times. Yep.
Okay. So what's
Um,
what's the number that people call then usually if they need the ambulance in
it's
Cambodia?
actually it's actually a mobile number. It's nothing like America where it's 911, or Australia where it's
Ah,
it's
okay.
actually a mobile number from memory.
And
So
do
you
you
literally
know,
contact hospital.
yeah, do you know if it's privatized or it's actually government run or
I'm pretty sure it's all privatized through the
privatized?
actual hospitals. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, traffic is really interesting. I mean, I think I've witnessed a few um accidents that ended up with people losing their life. However, I think that people are way more patient too. Even when you're talking about the honking and so forth, I mean it's everywhere, but people are so much more patient, right? Like you said, it's not about like justifying their right or trying to like, get you on one or anything like that. It's like just let me go. I want to give you a heads up. And I found that really interesting compared to even here in the States, like you said. So that's an interesting point. Anything else that you felt like you were like feeling like there was a huge change that you're like, wait a minute, I was gone for a year and now this just came up. culturally or anything relevant to your work?
I think in terms of the local love for Cambodian made products has
Mm,
definitely, as I said, the early years, everything in the shops, the markets and whatnot were all, products from neighboring countries, from
mm-hmm,
Singapore, from China. Uh, but over the years, there's a lot more Cambodian brands, lots more locally made products, which is great to see. So obviously that's going to help the economy, the local economy. And then obviously with the development of the major cities and whatnot, which is pretty cool to see. Like, but that's always natural in terms of how a city evolves. But it's good to see that Cambodia is joining the ranks and having nice buildings, new buildings and development all around.
yeah, that's awesome. Now, can you take us back again to like the work that you're doing right now, which is pretty groundbreaking? If you want to talk to us a little bit about that, I believe it's Beyond Angkor, and then I know there's something that came out in the Phnom Penh Post about it, I believe just in the past couple of months or so. Can
Yep.
you talk to us about that? How did that start? I know you've been back a few times, and why did you start it? How did you build your project team? What was that experience like to even expand it and go beyond the borders of Cambodia?
Yeah. So Beyond Angkor obviously started with my passion for the history of Cambodia. So, anything Angkorian or pre-Angkorian. Um, Trying to visit a lot of these ancient sites in the early mid 2000s was very challenging. And I guess I was inspired initially in terms of seeking out these ruins or temples through other explorers that visited in the late 90s and early 2000s, where they literally were basing it on locals and there was no GPSs or anything like that back then. But during my time when exploring, I based on printed maps,
Mm,
walking around and visiting villages and asking or showing them the map and going, oh, I believe that there's a prasat here somewhere. And there was no easy access
mm-hmm.
to locating these locations. And in the mid 2000s, trying to find these resources, trying to find maps or anything like that, there was nothing that was sort of consolidated. There were French books that were produced showing you all the different ruins in remote Cambodia. There were maps that were published. There is an online database by SEAsia and EFEO,
Who is
but
that?
EFEO, it's like an early French institution where
Mm,
they looked after or researched Southeast Asian history and archaeology.
okay.
That was EFEO. But yeah, so all the information was sort of scattered. So what I had the idea of, way back then was to somehow create an online database to showcase all these locations and pinpoint them on a map. But back then, I had no idea on any, websites or programming
Mm,
or anything like that. I didn't know where to start. I just figured it was a big project, and it just never was initiated. Um, Over the years, going back and forth to Cambodia and visiting all these sites, the hard way, as I said, no.
mm-hmm.
Uh, Come to COVID, we had the crazy lockdowns, and Melbourne, Australia, had one of the
Mm-hmm.
longest lockdowns in the world, where we were locked down and stuck at home for over 10 months.
Mm,
Um, and being so used to traveling to Cambodia or just anywhere in general quite frequently, at least probably once a year, I'll be traveling overseas.
yeah.
Stuck at home for a few years during the COVID-19 through to, you know, 22, I decided to sort of start looking at what options there were to create a possible website. And then being that wiki over the years has sort of developed and become quite mainstream, I thought of the
Mm,
idea of,
mm-hmm.
oh, why would why not look at creating or utilizing the wiki platform? So I found Media Wiki, which is a free source coding, so to speak.
Yeah, open
Application
source. Yeah.
open source, where you can implement that on your own website. And over the course of the initial setup, it took quite a while to actually configure the site the way it currently is, because I kept on finding little quirks and little bits and pieces or extensions that I was able to add to incorporate what I wanted to achieve. And that started in January 2021.
Wow, so it
So,
really blew up from January 2021.
yes. So from January 2021 through to the middle of 2021, so it would be about June, that's when I sort of publicly released it, so to speak.
Yeah.
I didn't really try any marketing. I haven't spent anything on marketing or anything like that. It was more just through social media, through Facebook, and through acts to share the online resource. And then up until now, we have about 13,000 historical sites or possible historical sites. The reason why I say possible is through the course of working on this project, not only am I listing sites that are or have been discovered by the other entities such as SEAsia, by the EFEO, by the ministries in Cambodia, or anything like that. I've actually been scanning Google satellite imagery, zooming in, close up to about 200 meters, so you can actually see the different landscapes. And I've been scanning every corner, and I'm not even joking, every corner of Cambodia, zooming in, panning across 4 to 5 times over. And I have managed to locate sites that have obvious land formations that are not man-made. So traces of a reservoir, traces of a moated enclosure, which are most likely, highly likely to be remnants of a ancient site. And I'm not saying that each one of these sites have a massive Angkorian standing tower the size of Angkor or the Bayon. They might just be a small pile of rubble, or it literally might just have one fragment of a piece of stone left from years and years of neglect. So I've managed to pinpoint and list thus far over 6,000 possible ancient sites that I believe have not been all listed or documented by any of the previously mentioned entities.
Yeah.
I recently saw news that the ministry in Cambodia, they have logged, I believe, 9,000 sites in Cambodia in general. So I believe that there may be some overlap in terms of the ones that I have marked as not confirmed sites. But obviously, being that the catalog list that's issued by the ministries, they are not publicly available. So I at the moment don't have any knowledge of the names or what is at those sites.
Are you going to be working with them more closely to kind of reconcile that, or what's their possibility of actually including, you into this process that they're working on? Because the stuff that you're doing is just so fascinating. No one's ever done it before. It's revolutionary, and to me, it's cultural preservation, the work that you're doing for future generations. I'm just wondering, like, what is that process like if you were to work with the ministry? I forgot what ministry it was, but then also, like, what's the pushback from authorities? Have you got any pushback from authorities? I know you also listed that you've done sites mapping even in Laos, in Thailand, and in Vietnam. So I'm wondering, like, if there's any authority pushback or challenges as well.
No, there wouldn't. I don't believe that there would be any pushback from any of the authorities. The internet, say, open source encyclopedia, so to speak. So free information and whatnot. So in terms of working with the ministry, I have not reached out to them. They have not reached out to me. It is, I believe, beyond Angkor, still in its infancy stages. Hopefully one day we could possibly have some sort of partnership or some sort of, as you said, cross-reference, and for them to provide information and for me to provide possible new locations that they have not discovered. because I know that the EFEO and SEAsia, they were sort of working through the different ministries over time. As I said, EFEO is from the early 20th century. That's when they sort of started cataloging everything. EFEO is still active in Cambodia, but they are more sort of about preserving and researching Angkor, not necessarily mapping every minute site anymore. And then sort of SEAsia came along in the mid-90s, I believe. It was a French researcher with a local Cambodian traveler or guide that actually went out to a lot of these sites. And SEAsia at that point in time had documented 5,000 sites in Cambodia. So in the last 15 or so years since SEAsia has sort of stopped researching or stopped updating their database, in the last 15 years, the ministry in Cambodia has documented, as I mentioned before, about 9,000 sites. So they've sort of discovered another 4,000. Whereas Beyond Angkor at the moment has, in total, over 13,000 in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam. But for Cambodia alone, at this current point in time, from memory, we have, I think it was 11,000 or 12,000 sites documented. I still have another 5,000 or 6,000 sites that I have not uploaded onto Beyond Angkor yet, and that is only for Cambodia alone. So obviously there may be some opportunity for the ministry to find or locate new potential historical sites. I'm not guaranteeing that all the sites that I have discovered through satellite imagery are actually historical sites, but sort of just based on comparing with confirmed sites, they do look like actual traces of historical activity at some point in time.
Gotcha. And now, in terms of funding, like, are you receiving funding to do this, or is this your own dollars and your own squat equity and that goes into this?
So the actual web hosting is funded by myself. I have put in a little like donate or how to help or support Beyond Angkor on the actual platform. There has been a few donors who've sort of chipped in $10, $20, but it doesn't cover the overall cost each year. The first 3 years, I was able to sort of, obviously, when I signed up to a web hosting, they sort of provided like an introductory offer. Was a reasonable price. And I guess it's a bit of a challenge because I'm based in Australia and the Australian dollar is quite weak compared to the US. And web hosting was in the US dollar. So it does sort of add up from my perspective. But yeah, after the first 3 years, the actual web hosting increases to the total price of 3 years per year. So that becomes a bit more challenging in terms of funding. It's not anything drastic, but yeah, it's good to see that some people in the community have sort of taken on board to assist with funding for Beyond Angkor.
Yeah. I would imagine a lot of people see value in the work that you're doing intergenerationally as well. And I see that you also have like a whole team of folks that work with you. How were you able to like find these people to help support the work that you're doing? And are they mainly based in Cambodia right now?
So Mark Ord, I've been in contact with Mark for a number of years, primarily through Facebook. He runs All Points East, a tour company out of Chiang Mai, Thailand. He is from the UK, and being that he runs a tourist company during COVID, obviously everything was sort of at a standstill. So I sort of mentioned the project to him, and he was very interested. Like his passion is also Angkorian history, and he took it on board to actually join and assist with listing sites and populating the different pages on Beyond Angkor. So he and I are the main contributors to the main folks that actually populate and create the pages on Beyond Angkor. Then we've got a list of other contributors who are just, I guess, anyone that wants to assist. So They may supply images, they may supply or confirm locations of sites, they may give updates in terms of, oh, that site has XYZ, ABC.
Mm,
So any sort of source of information, regardless of how little or how big, I mention those contributors as part of the list there,
mm-hmm.
just for all that credit is provided where due.
Yeah.
But we've got Sopetra also listed there, who
Mm-hmm.
is our sort of like our local uh, mini archaeologists, sort of our little specialists there that we sort of get assistance with some of the determining the art styles of certain sites. So some of the more remote sites, obviously, we can't confirm or tell when they were constructed, but by comparing the different art styles with the major sites like Angkor, the Bayon,
Yeah.
the Pun and Bakay and stuff like that, we're able to sort of analyze any remaining sculptures that may be found at these smaller sites and say, oh, this site is potentially built in the 10th century. This site is potentially built in the 13th century, as an example. So here's our little sort of go-to, a little consultant,
Mm-hmm.
where we get that extra bit of information when required.
That's nice. Wanted to check in, like, what about the Apsara Authority? Have they been involved in this, or are they lending any type of support to your project?
Nope, as I said, haven't had any contact or haven't reached out
Mm,
from any officials, so to speak. This is a completely privately run, independently run little project, a hobby, a passion, so to speak.
yeah.
But yeah,
But it's going strong. I mean, you've listed a lot, what, like 13,000 of those sites. I bet it takes forever probably to go to each one too if you're like on land and like trying to make your rounds all around Southeast Asia for sure. So what's next for the project, Alan? What are you foreseeing for the project in the near future?
well, the site is still far from complete. As I said, I've still got many sites to list. We're still working on listing all the sites in Thailand. We only just started listing sites in southern Vietnam. And there's still many sites in Cambodia that we have yet to upload and list as well. In terms of the next stage, I guess it's about trying to get more people involved. So it's not it's not going to be a major sort of like a major website or anything. Like the
Mm,
topic is quite niche. So your average tourist, your average Cambodian, so to speak, wouldn't really have much interest in beyond Angkor. They will just be interested in visiting Angkor Wat as above there. But for anyone that wants to sort of get off the beaten path, for any students, for any archaeologist, for any researcher that may want to see a bigger picture of the extent of the Khmer realm.
mm-hmm.
I believe Beyond Angkor is or was one of the earliest examples of presenting that through its uniquely designed graphical interactive maps that actually showcases every site on a Google satellite image, where in the past, traditionally, you'll find maps would have like the little pins, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But most most maps that you find with any of the Angkorian sites listed will just be a little black dot. So in all your different history books, on any sort of website, majority of them will have just like a little black pin or a little red pin to denote a site of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Only in more zoomed in maps where you sort of see the differences in the different sites. So when you're focusing on the Angkor area, you'll see different pins that represents the different temples, right? But overall, the broader picture of the whole entire Southeast Asia, most of the broader maps, you'll just find an individual stylized pin that indicates the different points of interest.
Mm,
Whereas Beyond Angkor showcases all the pins based on the size of the site, the condition of the site, the
right.
type of. So whether it's a big ruin, a small mound, an ancient bridge, an ancient village, an ancient kiln, whether it is just a museum, a depository, of stones where they might have it at a little nectar shrine or a little wat.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
actual map depicts all these different locations so that at a glance, you can then say, oh, there's a temple site I want to go to. That's just a mound. It's not worth going to, but I might want to look into it.
Mm-hmm.
But it allows you to differentiate between what each site is and what may be there.
And I love that because it's like I'm looking at your map keys right now, and it's it's something that you can easily like navigate and see what it lists everything here. Is there any other stuff that you would actually add to the map keys that is ongoing, or is this like kind of it for now?
I think that is kind of it for now. There are possibly a few other types of sites out there, but there wasn't enough of those particular locations to sort of warrant its own individual key. So we've sort of just classified them under other structures.
Gotcha. So when you list museums, what is that in ancient times?
No, so these museums are obviously not in ancient times. These are just modern day museums that showcases any ancient artifacts relating to the Angkorian era.
Okay, gotcha. Because I was like, what? I must be missing something if you've got museums around there, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
So
I love that.
museums fall under the classification of depositories, where the depositories are obviously of modern times.
Mm-hmm.
Other depositories include the museums, the Wats or modern day temples, and Netdar shrines. So, local folks, they would, generally speaking, if they find an ancient stone, they will probably leave it in a little Netdar shrine to worship, or at the local temple for safekeeping and worship. So we still list those because they are still of interest
Mm-hmm.
in terms of people who are interested in researching about Angkor. And you'll be surprised to find that at some of these Wats and some of these Netdars, you may find a nice carving, sort of sitting in place, being worshipped by the locals.
Mm.
So even though it's not an ancient site, it is traces of an ancient artifact, so to speak.
Gotcha. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more or share why you think this is important for the Khmer diaspora, and for the younger generation?
I think in terms of that, it does raise a very big question. And it's all about, as you sort of said before, about preservation. So, I commend all the archaeologists, the ministries for, preserving the temples that we currently have.
Mm.
However, there are many, many ancient sites till this day where they are still being sort of not necessarily demolished, because a lot of these sites are already long gone, but traces of some of these ancient mounds which are surrounded by a moat or may have a reservoir 100 meters away. These are former ancient temple sites, and unfortunately with these sites they don't necessarily get the attention that our bigger temples get. So some do get lost to history through development and farming. By scanning satellite imagery over the
Mm.
last year, I have managed to compare old satellite imagery and have pinpointed many sites where 10 years ago there were still traces of the moats, but come to more recent imagery, the traces of the moats, the reservoirs, are literally gone.
Oh,
They're either, they've
that
either been
sucks.
built over by local villages or a, by development. I'm not going to name specifics because it may be a bit sensitive. But yeah, areas are being cleared and made way for development and farming.
Mm-hmm.
There is a category which you can find on the left-hand side in the menu that says destroyed sites. So we are documenting those sites and showing you, or showing the people, the changes in that landscape over the years based on Google
Mm.
satellite imagery as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about preservation, because you can imagine over time, people will obviously forget about these locations, and the whole idea or the whole purpose of Beyond Angkor is to paint a bigger picture of what Angkor was.
Right.
Most
Yeah.
commonly people think of Angkor primarily being the ancient city in Siem Reap where the major temples are. But Angkor was well beyond that. So hence why the name of the site, Beyond Angkor,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where we are trying to explore and document all sites, no matter how big, how small, no matter how well preserved, or whether you literally just find one little piece of stone present on the mound. They are still important to us, but I believe that they are still important to document and to preserve in the sense of giving people the opportunity to see and understand the extent of the Khmer realm.
Wow. Yeah, I know that's fascinating. And I think like people would probably like to know how they can also be involved, Alan. So what are like some ways that you foresee folks being involved to support, or what type of support do you think would be most needed?
So on the website beyondangkor.org, it is a wiki platform. But in order to contribute, to edit, to upload pictures and so forth, I have set it up so that you need to sign in or sign up as a member.
Hmm.
Membership free. It is up to you whether people want to donate to contribute to the upkeep of Beyond Encore. But in terms of contributing, all people need to do is sign up and sign in,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where they can then open up any of the articles within the Beyond Encore page. And similar to a wiki, you would then just go edit and you make your necessary changes. People can also support us by following us on social media. So we're on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, SnapQ, the newer Khmer social media platform.
What?
We're on a
Wow.
few we're on a few different platforms where people can sort of follow and comment or ask questions if needed.
Uh-huh.
Um, so every every element of what I've just mentioned helps overall in terms of getting Beyond Angkor out there. So it's not about, for me, it's not about, trying to get it out there to be mainstream. It's more just getting it out there so that the community are aware of this resource, of this new
Mm-hmm.
unique resource, where they can find maybe a bit of knowledge and visual maps to sort of pinpoint and determine how big Angkor was and what influence it had on mainland Southeast Asia.
Yeah, yeah, no, I bet even academics and students would find this fascinating as well, as if they're doing work around Cambodia or ancient civilizations. Um, Alan, this has been really fantastic. I wanted to ask, like, what are three like definite things that you want folks to kind of take away from this learning process of learning about what you're working on beyond Angkor, and those next steps?
Preservation, respect for what was, I guess, built by the ancestors, um, and just to sort of, I guess, understand the importance of cultural heritage. I think the main thing that I see in terms of what is happening at a lot of these sites is I guess the destruction or the disrespect that has fallen on these places over time. Um, Whereas if a lot of these places were preserved, maybe there weren't any ancient towers left or anything like that, but there may have been traces of artifacts and whatnot. So a lot of these places, what was left over at some point in time could have been preserved in a local village museum or a local provincial museum or something like that, where they could potentially pull in visitors to visit other areas of Cambodia and not just Siem Reap and Phnom Penh. So it's about sort of preserving the history that we have, preserving what has been left by the ancestors, and being able to sort of showcase that rather than sort of just have it all disappear in history. Um, in terms of the site, it would be great to see more people sort of jumping on board and contributing, whether it be just uploading a single picture for a site that we may not have pictures for. Because
Mm,
I personally only been to, I believe, 800 of these sites.
Wow, that's a lot already. You said been
So
to 800.
yeah, so in terms of pictures, we've got what 13,000 sites listed, but
Uh-huh.
in terms of pictures, I think we've got two or 3,000 sites that actually have pictures loaded, and that is through contributors who have sort of visited sites and they go, oh, that doesn't have a picture, so they've sort of provided us pictures that we can then upload onto Beyond Angkor. I have reached out to a bunch of locals in Cambodia who do their own little thing in each sort of area that they are living in. And I always ask permission prior, so I'll message them and go, oh, you visited these sites, would you be okay for us to use these images on Beyond Angkor? And everyone has so far been very generous, so hence why we are able to provide a library of, I believe, almost 3,000 sites that have pictures loaded on Beyond Angkor. Obviously there are still many more sites.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of naturally, I guess, evolving or growing the site. So hopefully over time there will be a lot more progress in terms of the content. So similar to what you were saying before, where archaeologists and researchers and whatnot could potentially be interested in the platform. At the moment, to be honest, the site, for each article, for each page, they may not have as much information as you would expect from, official research papers or history books or anything like that. Some of the articles have detailed information, but a lot of these sites, there is no historical information about these sites. A lot of them are like random
Yeah.
temple mounds in the rice paddy fields or in the forest where no one's either been to, or maybe 10 people have been to in the course of the last century or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So there's no actual history or information about these sites. So we can only document what we visually see, and we can only document and compare with any notes that may have been left behind by the early French explorers. On that note, based on the research that I've sort of done, it has been quite depressing to see that many sites that the French explorers documented, they documented or reported them being still standing towers, standing temples, and you visit now and they're literally just a mound. So a lot of the destruction wasn't due to natural causes from the 15th century to the 19th century. A lot of the destruction has been literally in the last century, whether it be due to war, civil unrest, looting by massive gangs that are sort of operated by Douglas Latchford. So if you are interested, you should Google Douglas Latchford. He's an Englishman born in India who lives in Thailand, who boasted about being, the go-to scholar on Khmer sculptures. But it turns out that he was, I guess, the ringleader or the person that sort of initiated a lot of the pillaging and looting of Cambodian artifacts in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Is he still alive?
He passed away, I believe, I think it was last year or the year before, probably 2 years, maybe.
A lot of trafficking. That's that's so unfortunate. But I mean, I think it's just fascinating, even though like there's not a lot of information about there in the mainstream, but for you to be able to actually map that out and just let folks know through Beyond Angkor, but also for like generations to come, in my perspective, I think it's awesome because then people can start to realize that there's more, like you said, to Angkor than just Angkor Wat.
Correct.
I mean, it's so vast. Wasn't it like Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia were all under the
Correct.
kingdom?
Correct. So some archaeological traces can still be found in southern Vietnam. There are only, I believe, two restored brick towers in South Vietnam, in Tây Ninh province and in Bạc Liêu province. Ancient Cambodian or Angkorian temples can be found in southern Laos. So the most famous one there being Wat Phu. But if you sort of travel up north in the central region, there are traces of some ruins there as well. And then the furthest north in Laos would be in Vientiane or Vientiane, in the capital city there, where there are traces of an Angkorian temple there. In terms of Thailand, The Angkorian realm pretty much covered most of Thailand, modern day Thailand. But a lot of the structures that can be found are predominantly based in Isan or in the northeast, where that has still in modern times a large population of Khmers as well. But yeah, the Angkorian Empire did stretch up all the way to the north in Sukhothai, to the west in Kanchanburi, and down south to Phetchaburi.
Have you been to these areas in Thailand and Laos and Vietnam that you're stating? And if you have, what was that experience like to go see?
So I was backpacking Southeast Asia for 4 months back in 2006,
Oh, wow, I
where
didn't know that.
where I visited Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, and a few other places. And during those travels, I did manage to visit a lot of the Angkorian sites in Thailand. When I say a lot, it is a lot considering, but there are well over possibly 1,500, 2,000 sites in Thailand. Whether it be an ancient village, an ancient temple, an ancient reservoir, we still classify those as points of interest from a historical perspective. But I visited in total about 100 Angkorian sites in Thailand, stretching up to Sukhothai, Kanchanburi in the west, Phetchaburi down south, and obviously in the center where Lopburi is. But also sort of focusing on the Isan region, visiting some of the larger temples there. And in Laos, I did the same during that trip. I visited Wat Phu. In terms of getting around back then, it was a lot easier in Thailand. They even, 15, 20 years ago, they have restored a lot of these sites, not every single one, but they've restored a lot of these sites. And along their major highways, they have signs indicating what and where points of interest are. So visitors can easily locate these sites, whereas in Laos, it was a bit more challenging trying to get to the remote sites. The main site is the most common and easy to get to, but there were a few sites that I visited further south in Laos, where there were no roads at all. It was literally just a dirt track. So that was very challenging to reach. But in Cambodia, very similar. It's only the main sites that are sort of advertised or marked on the streets. A lot of these smaller sites that scattered across the country, they are considered off the beaten path in many respects. There is no real easy route or easy way to get there, or even signposts along our national highways. There's no real indication of where these sites are. There may be a small site that a local has made, but nothing sort of official. So it'd be good to see if and when Cambodia continues to develop that, they sort of showcase the other historical sites around the country so that tourists and visitors are aware and they can then sort of focus their trip not just on Angkor, Siem Reap, but to explore more of Cambodia.
What's your experience, or how do you feel about landmines? Were you kind of iffy, going off the beaten track and looking for these, temples all across the country?
Funny story. 2006, when I was in Cambodia, there's an ancient highway leading out from Angkor through to Prasat Bang Melia, and from Prasat Bang Melia, there's the continual ancient highway that goes to Prasat Prakan in Kupong Swai, or also known as Prasat Bakan. So this ancient highway has, I think it was 28 ancient bridges and a bunch of rest houses, or what we would know in modern day as Samnat guest houses or motels out in the west, and then ancient hospitals scattered along the route. So back in 2006, I visited Prasat Bang Melia, and I was literally on the back of a scooter with the driver. Back then, I didn't, I guess, have the guts to be riding around myself in Cambodia. Mind you, I am doing that now. But yeah, back then it was sitting on the back of a scooter.
Remind us again, what year was this? Sorry, what year was this?
2006.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we met a guard at Pasat Bangmalia, and he was sort of familiar with that ancient route. So it was literally three of us on the one scooter riding through this ancient highway where it wasn't really a highway. It was literally an ox cart track
Yeah.
going, crossing through streams, muddy tracks, dirt tracks, and it was rough. Like the journey was rough, and three of us on the scooter.
For three of you, yeah.
So the ancient highway, we're traveling through. We stopped off at the different points of interest where the ancient bridges were, and I was seeking out. It was Pasat Thorpe, Pasat Thorpe. I can't remember the name. It's just sort of not. I know it, but I don't know. I can't remember it. But there's two temples. One is the rest house, and one just a temple, and it's literally in the forest. So this ancient highway, there were no villages, there
Yeah.
was no fields. It was just all
Wow.
forest.
Wow.
And we managed to come across a local sort of nearby the vicinity of the temple, and he took us through the forest. We trekked through the forest, like bush bashing through the forest. We reached the ancient temple. After my 4-month backpacking trip, I returned home. I'm reading online. There's forums online. Please do not venture off the beaten path along this highway from Bengmalia to Bakan, because there are still unexploded ordinances and mines. And I'm like,
OMG.
I was just there.
I mean, I'm so glad nothing happened to you, but wow. But the people that were with you didn't even know that either.
Well, my scooter driver, my motor, nope, he would
Uh-huh.
have known. The guide or the guard at Prasad Malia, he may or may not have known, but I'm assuming the locals, they would roughly know a trail, but it did not look like a trail. As I said, we were bush bashing through the forest.
Yeah, I hear you. And I wonder because more places are getting demined right now, right? Is that the terminology they use? So it's probably much more safer
Correct.
to go around off the beaten track.
So it was recently announced that a few more provinces have now been declared mine-free, which is amazing to see and hear. But yeah, in the 90s, the early 2000s, there was still mines pretty much everywhere. And, you hear stories of people losing limbs and losing lives quite frequently.
OMG, yeah.
It is good to see the development, the clearing of the mines is progressing, which will open the doors for more explorers to be able to venture off the beaten path and explore these sites.
Wow. I mean, yeah.
Coming back to exploring these sites, it's some people will then question, and even locals will question, why do you want to come and look at stones and a brick,
I'm
a brick
sorry,
in the
damn.
field, or a brick or a stone in the forest? Like, why? There's nothing there. I think a part of it is the journey. Yeah, it's not necessarily the destination, but it's the adventure, the journey, the people that you meet, the
Yeah,
stories that you can tell. Like
for sure.
like the
Yeah.
stories about trekking, bush bashing through potentially
Yeah.
mine-driven forests and stuff like that. So
Memories.
it's all about the memories, the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like I'm wondering like, you know, I mean, to me, I'm like, I don't think Laura Croft has anything on this, by the way. You're beyond that now. But like, do you consider yourself kind of like a historian as well, or an explorer, a historian, or what?
I consider myself as an amateur explorer, pretty much just a hobby, a passion, a labor of love,
Mm.
um, to sort of preserve and maintain. Like, as I said, the initial idea was to showcase and display where I visited, like the 800 sites that I visited. But then, researching over the years, I just couldn't find that centralized source of information where people could easily find information about sites and find locations on a map. So that's where I went beyond the sites that I visited and sort of built up the database that what we see today as beyond Angkor. It's more about preserving and showcasing what Angkor is, not simply just Angkor Wat. And there's always that misconception that, Angkor Wat is all there is.
Right. And when you say you visited 800 sites, I can't even fathom that. So I'm like the commitment and dedication you put into this, like how long do you usually stay to actually be able to visit so many sites every time you go visit?
It varies. Like, as I said, I've been back 15 times, but not all 15 times have been about exploring. The first two trips was literally just traveling the major tourist sites,
Mm,
back in 2001, 2002, being 17, 18, being restricted by family and not necessarily knowing. As I said,
mm-hmm,
information was quite scarce back then. So the first few trips was more just visiting the major sites. 2005 was the following trip where I sort of ventured a bit more, not necessarily off the beaten path, but exploring other provinces with their major sites. So, down south in Takeo and
mm-hmm.
Kupao, where there are a few ancient temples, standing temples still. So sort of ventured away from the major temple sites. It wasn't until 2006 that I then started exploring, as I mentioned earlier, the neighboring countries and visiting the ancient sites there.
Mm-hmm.
But, these first four trips was very minuscule in terms of the number of sites that I visited because they were just mainly the major sites. It wasn't until 2009, I went twice, 2010 and
Mm-hmm.
13, where a lot of the exploration sort of took place. That is when I literally explored the backwaters of Cambodia, going through rice paddy fields, going deep into rural Cambodia, into the forest, and seeking out these sites, whether it be a standing temple or whether it be a mound. I think it was in 2009, one of the trips I was there for 3 weeks, and I traveled, I think, two weeks out of the 3 weeks exploring, and I visited 160 ancient sites in the two
Wow.
weeks.
Wow.
Um,
That's like from morning to night then, I would assume.
pretty much every day, all day, and it wasn't just focusing on one area. It was literally riding a scooter from Siem Reap through to Banti Minche, Oda Minche,
Yeah,
Prahikia, Kompom, and then back to Siem Reap. And back then we only sort of touched the surface. There's still so many sites, and every time I go back, there's always more sites to explore. Um,
for sure. It's
so
like digging
yeah,
up
like
history.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
like every time
a
you go,
lot of
something fresh comes up.
correct. And very similar to when I'm scanning satellite imagery. I told you where I scanned it 5 times, like the same location 5
Mm-hmm.
times, and I still find ancient traces that I didn't pinpoint previously. Um,
That's
so the same with
wild.
it's the same with visiting in person. Like a lot of these sites, they are getting lost to history, right? The forest is going over them, development, rice fields are being plowed.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a matter of documenting these sites so that they're not lost forever.
Mm. Have you considered even going under the moat around Angkor Wat? I think someone said to me once that they were actually doing something like that, where they're taking something underwater just to go see if there's anything significant under there.
Are you going to fund that for me? I'll do it if you fund it.
I'll be there with you as long as it's not what happened to the Titan. I'll be okay. I mean, that's just amazing. Definitely think that's a really interesting kind of like concept to think about to go around that moat and see what's going on. But I mean, what you're doing there, like just being able to see new things and fresh new things all the time, that's just like that. I think it gives for me like there's inspiration that continues on for generations as well to actually realize that there's more, like you said, than just Angkor Wat and the Angkor Archaeological Park. There's so many more areas that have never been discovered or rediscovered by our own culture, our own communities members, and foreigners. When's the next time you're going to be in Cambodia?
I'm not sure. That is a very good question. I would love to return back, but I'm not sure at this stage.
That's cool. I mean, that would be great if, people want to follow your work and stuff. They can know next time when you're going to be in town and, see how the work's being done once you, hopefully
Or
not through.
even come exploring as well. Like I plan to not run tours or anything, but I
Mhm.
plan to still continue continually go out and explore. And if people want to join, they're more than welcome to jump on a scooter and join us. The trail might be tough, but everyone's welcome.
But a lot of it is already demined, so we're gonna be okay. Yes, no, I think that's a fascinating like idea. So please let us know when that happens as well. And beyondangkor.org is the site. So we'll put that down in the description as well. And Alan, how they can contact you is through the site and through Facebook. So you have that. You have IG, you have some other social media that we can share as well. So
Yes, there's a link on all the social medias, link tr.ee/beyond Angkor, and that will actually list all our different contact methods.
fascinating. Great. I know we're kind of almost scrunching on time, but I wanted to ask you again, like, is there anything specific that you also want people to like drill on from this conversation, or are we good and people can connect with you once we publish this?
Yep. Get out of your safe zone and go exploring Cambodia. The country in general could do with additional people visiting in terms of outside of the main tourist areas, just to sort of
Yeah.
the economy. Whether it be you buy a little drink or snacks in a local village, that all helps the local economy. So, as I said, it's more to do with exploration, preservation, and supporting the local communities. And what I would like seen done, as I said before, is to have these communities or regions where they can have something to be proud of, because over time a lot of these sites are destroyed, but if they were preserved, or if a little museum was sort of built, people would visit, and they might charge $1 for tourists or whatever it might be. It's all about just sort of preservation and bolstering the local economy.
I love that. Like really supporting the local economy in different areas around the country. With that being said, I want to thank you so much, Alan, just for like joining us. I know we have a huge time difference, but I'm so happy to be able to hear more about your project, learn about how it came about, and like really like the next steps of it that you're thinking about and getting people involved. I love the idea of the like going exploring. So let us know when that happens. We'd love to make sure that people know about that opportunity to be there with you. Thank you, Alan, for joining us, and we will be able to make sure that this goes out to our listserv and our communities to hear and learn more about Beyond Angkor. Again, y'all, this is beyondangkor.org. Thank you.
Thanks.